In the roaring 20s, cosmetics mogul Lillian Sefton Dodge crashed through the barriers of Long Island's old money enclaves by building a 60,000 square foot house with her self-earned new money. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Born in 1880, Lillian grew up in Washington, D.C. and even pursued a career in singing and acting as a young woman. In 1905, she married businessman Vincent Benjamin Thomas, who soon launched the Harriet Hubbard Ayer Cosmetics Company, one of the first American beauty firms. Lillian became deeply involved in the business from the start, working alongside her husband. When Vincent passed away unexpectedly in 1918, Lillian took the helm as president of the company, a bold move for a woman in that era. Under her leadership, the company thrived and grew into an international cosmetics empire, and by 1938, she was reportedly the highest paid woman executive in the US. In 1947, at 68 years old, Lillian sold the cosmetics firm to the Lever Brothers Corporation for approximately $5.5 million, the modern equivalent of nearly $80 million. But that's getting a bit ahead. In the meantime, Lillian's personal life evolved along with her career. By the early 1920s, she had remarried, this time to Robert Leftwich Dodge. He was a noted mural painter and stained glass artist. His works adorn institutions like Vassar College and even the Library of Congress. He joined Lillian's company as art director, blending his artistic eye with her business savvy. Together, the successful cosmetics executive and her artist husband began envisioning a stately country estate where they could enjoy the fruits of their labor. With the roaring 20s in full swing and Long Island's North Shore a hotspot for grand mansions, Lillian set out to build a home that would rival the finest of them. In 1922, Lillian commissioned the New York architectural firm of Clinton and Russell to design her dream home on an 86-acre waterfront site in Mill Neck, Long Island. The result, completed in 1925, was a sprawling, roughly 60,000 square foot Tudor Revival mansion she named Sefton Manor. The design was directly inspired by St. Catherine's Court, a historic Tudor mansion in Somerset, England, reflecting Lillian's lifelong affinity for English art and culture. True to the Tudor Revival, the mansion's exterior was constructed of rugged brown Westchester granite and tawny limestone trim. Steep grey slate roofs were punctuated by tall chimneys and gabled dormers that evoked a 16th century English country house. The estate's landscape was no afterthought either. Renowned landscape architect Charles Wilfrid Levitt laid out formal gardens on the grounds, including a sunken garden adorned with classical ornaments. Visitors would find trim boxwood hedges, stone urns on pedestals, and even 3 domed pavilions flanking a reflecting pond. At the center stood an imported 18th century Venetian tiered fountain splashing gently, all part of a romantic European ambiance in the Long Island countryside. No expense was spared in making Sefton Manor House a show house of craftsmanship. The mansion's front entrance featured 500-year-old solid oak doors fitted with hand-forged iron hardware by Samuel Yellen, a famed ironworker of the era. Visitors stepping through those grand doors entered a towering great hall, 24 by 42 feet, lined floor to ceiling in oak paneling and boasting an elaborately hand-molded plaster ceiling. To one end, the fireplace steals our attention away from the grand staircase, which we will see soon enough. And to the other, we can swing open iron grills and step through the pointed archway to find the living room. This is the largest room in the house, spanning from the front to the back below a dazzling Jacobean plaster ceiling, with a large bay window filtering in multicolored light through stained glass panels. Off to the side, a door opens out to the side porch, where checkered floors meet with the limestone-clad arcades reaching out towards the garden. Had we headed the other direction in the Great Hall, we would have found the formal dining room, continuing with walls clad in richwood paneling. Continuing our journey, we find grand rooms, some with alcoves creating cozy but stately nooks. Back in the Great Hall, we'll find the grand staircase and begin our journey to the second floor. As we arrive at the stair landing, we pass by antique European tapestries and genuine suits of armor. The stained glass windows just in front of us were a custom commission, each one depicting scenes from various Shakespeare plays. Let's take a quick look at the floor plan for the second level before continuing on. Above the living room is where we find the couple's bedroom, interestingly taking a break from heavy woodwork to introduce light colors and painted millwork. In July 1940, Robert passed away after a long illness, dying at home in the manor at age 68. Lillian was devastated by the loss of her husband and partner, but continued living at Sefton Manor for much of the 1940s. In 1947, she decided to retire from business, selling her cosmetics company and preparing to close that chapter of her life. Soon after, she turned her attention to the future of Sefton Manor. Rather than let the estate fall into decline or be sold off to developers, Lillian arranged for the property to take on a new life. In 1949, the Lutheran Friends of the Deaf, a charitable arm of the Lutheran Church, purchased Sefton Manor. Their vision was to establish a residential school for deaf children on Long Island, and the ready-made campus of Sefton Manor was an ideal setting. The mansion was soon renamed Millneck Manor, reflecting the local village name, and preparations began to convert the opulent home into an educational institution. Remarkably, the conversion was done with great sensitivity to the historic architecture. The organization's architects made only gentle modifications to accommodate classrooms and dormitories, ensuring that the manor's character was preserved. Over the following decades, Millneck Manor School for the Deaf flourished, and by 1956, the school was fully accredited by New York State, confirming the quality of the education provided there. The school made a few well-thought-out changes to the property, and this careful planning made Millneck Manor a standout example of how to adapt a historic Gold Coast estate for institutional use without sacrificing its architectural integrity. Indeed, through the late 20th century, the property remained extraordinarily intact. The formal gardens kept their original layout, the grand entrance drive still swept past rows of stately beech trees, and inside, the mansion's many original fixtures and details survived. Lillian Sefton Dodge lived to see the early years of the school's success. She passed away in 1960 in New York City at the age of 80. Lillian effectively left behind the legacy of the estate in the hands of the Lutheran Friends of the Deaf. By the turn of the 21st century, Millneck Manor School for the Deaf had evolved into a day school program, and in 2002, the last regular classes moved out of the old mansion into newly built facilities on the campus. The great house by the bay had finally earned a restful semi-retirement after half a century of daily school use. Today, Lillian Sefton Dodge's beloved estate still stands as a jewel of Long Island's North Shore. Long Island's fabled Gold Coast once glittered with opulent mansions and the storied lives of those who built them. One such grand estate is Mallow, the magnificent Oyster Bay Cove mansion of Walter C. Farwell. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Walter's journey to prominence began with the impressive legacy of his father, Charles Benjamin Farwell. Charles had started with little and became a powerhouse in Chicago's business and political scenes. After moving to Illinois as a young man, he built a thriving dry goods enterprise with his brother and later served as a U.S. congressman and senator. His success was exemplified in part by the grand residences he built for his family. In 1882, Senator Farwell constructed a palatial Chicago mansion at 120 East Pearson Street on the city's fashionable Near North Side. The city mansion was a three-story showplace of red brick, brown sandstone, and carved stone, crowned with a distinctive mansard roof in the French Second Empire style. Its opulent materials, including artesian wellstone and pressed brick, and prominent corner location, made it one of the most impressive private homes in Chicago. For decades, the Farwell mansion stood as a symbol of Gilded Age luxury, dominating the block alongside an equally grand home built for Charles' brother John. Unfortunately, Charles' Chicago residence only remained a city landmark until the mid-20th century, when it was finally demolished in 1946 to make way for a new development. Charles Farwell also established a splendid country estate in Lake Forest, Illinois, giving his family a retreat from the city. The estate, known as Fairlawn, was a sprawling property north of Chicago where the Farwell children, including young Walter, spent much of their upbringing. The original Fairlawn house was a fine Italianate villa built around 1870, reflecting the fashionable taste of the era. Growing up amid such privilege, Walter Farwell was heir to both a considerable fortune and a tradition of high achievement. Born in 1863, he was one of 9 children, and notably the only son to survive to adulthood. After graduating from Yale University, Walter entered the family enterprise and quickly assumed major responsibilities. He succeeded his father in business, becoming a vice president of John V. Farwell and Company. He also played a key role in managing the vast Texas land holdings that the Farwell family had acquired in the 1880s. His father and uncle had famously helped finance the construction of the Texas state capitol, for which they were rewarded with over 3 million acres of panhandle ranch land known as the XIT Ranch. In 1902, Walter married Mildred Mary Williams, a young woman who brought her own impressive pedigree and personality into the family. Mildred was the daughter of General Robert Williams and a well-known Washington, D.C. society belle, and she proved to be a dynamic partner for Walter. About 15 years his junior, she was renowned for her beauty. At one point, even touted as the most beautiful woman in America in the press, but she soon showed she was much more than just a socialite. When World War I erupted in Europe, Mildred Farwell astonished friends by volunteering as a war correspondent for the Chicago Tribune. She traveled to the front lines in 1915 to cover the conflict and aid the Red Cross, displaying remarkable courage and resourcefulness. By the close of World War I, the Farwells had amassed not only great wealth, but also a breadth of experience on the world stage. Now with peace restored, they were ready at last to create their dream estate by the sea, a mansion that would reflect their refined taste and adventurous lives. Thus was born Mallow, the Farwells' Long Island masterpiece. Construction of the mansion began around 1915 on a high wooded hilltop in Oyster Bay Cove on Long Island, about 35 miles from New York City. Walter had purchased an initial 85-acre farm property there in 1912, adding another 22 acres shortly after to assemble a sizable domain for his country house. For the design of the mansion, the Farwells turned to architect William Wells Bosworth, a Beaux-Arts-trained luminary who had an impeccable resume. Bosworth was fresh off major commissions, like designing the new MIT campus in Cambridge and crafting the formal gardens and facade of Kikuit, John D. Rockefeller's estate in New York. His classical expertise made him an ideal choice for what the Farwells envisioned, a Georgian Revival manor home that would exude the patina of an English country house. The choice of aged brick and tasteful limestone trim gave the house a sense of history and solidity, as if it had stood on that knoll for generations. The mansion's design embodied balanced, symmetrical Georgian proportions, a long rectangular main block with a hipped roof, chimneys anchoring the ends, and classically detailed entrances. A gravel drive approached the dignified front portico, while the garden facade opened out onto terraces overlooking the rolling grounds. Entering the mansion, we step into the vestibule, a large square room with cove ceilings soaring above dotted marble floors. We'll proceed forward in just a moment, but for now, let's turn our gaze to the left-hand side. Through a large archway, we get a glimpse of the grand staircase gracefully ascending to the second floor. Let's move in for a closer look. Passing through the archway, we can now clearly see wainscoting mirroring the balustrade on the wall behind the staircase. Now let's return to the vestibule and make our way straight forward, skipping over the gallery that runs between the vestibule and the next room. This brings us to the octagonal salon, a double-height room that doubled as the music room. Here we find fluted ionic pilasters rising towards a dentelated frieze, and as our eyes continue drifting upward, we find the room is traced by a catwalk, where we can imagine musicians stationed just out of reach from guests while the Farwells were hosting dinner parties. Bringing our attention back down, let's take a look at the fireplace and furnishings, noting chinoiserie lamps, a massive bas-relief, and a book rack for cozying up to the fire for a good read. Just off the octagonal salon, we find a room that is about the same size as the vestibule, known as the Coromandel room, named for the very wood that was used to clad the walls. The largest rooms each flank opposite sides of the house. The first one we'll explore is the library. Here the floor changes from marble to wood boards laid in a herringbone pattern, atop which we find floral furniture and a small handful of early modernist textiles sprinkled about. The room itself is classically styled, with pilasters reaching towards a festooned frieze and framing built-in bookshelves just above the height of the wainscoting. Over at the other end of the mansion, we'll find the dining room, which was a bit more reserved than some of the other rooms we've visited. Though when guests were visiting, the table most likely would have had all of its leaves in place, being ready to seat at least 20 dinner guests. Life at Mallow in the 20s and 1930s seems to have been both comfortable and cultured for the Farwells. The couple did not have any children, and this fact perhaps made their lifestyle more free and travel-focused. They could spend winters abroad or in Palm Beach and return to Long Island for the social season without worry of schooling or the like. In April 1941, Mrs. Farwell passed away at the age of 60. Her death was widely mourned. Newspapers remembered her not only as a great beauty, but as a heroic war correspondent and a gracious society host. Walter, now in his late 70s, was devastated by the loss of his beloved wife and partner of nearly 40 years. He continued to reside at Mallow, surrounded by memories of their life together. Then, just 2 years later in 1943, Walter passed away at the age of 80. Following Farwell's tenure, Mallow did not fade away. Instead, it began a new chapter, passing through a series of owners who ultimately gave the mansion a lasting purpose. In 1948, Eastwood School acquired the core of the Farwell estate, including the mansion. Today, the mansion that was Mallow still stands proudly as the heart of Eastwood School. Back in the days of monopolies, it was possible for robber barons to buy out entire towns on the Gold Coast, demolish every house and building, and replace them with their own mega mansion. Hi everyone, Ken here. This is the story of Ormston House. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1864, John Edward Aldred began life far from the world of mansions and millionaires. He was born in Lawrence, Massachusetts, a textile mill town, and by age 15, he was already working in the local mills. However, young John had bigger aspirations. Over the next few decades, through talent and tenacity, he climbed the ranks of industry to become a prominent business executive and financier. By the 1910s and 1920s, Aldred had made a name for himself in the burgeoning public utilities sector, which was the high-tech frontier of that era. He served as president of Baltimore's Consolidated Gas, Electric Light and Power Company and was a director of the United Railways and Electric Company in Maryland. His influence extended across state and even national borders. Aldred was at one point the president or top executive of an astonishing 37 different utility companies and amassed an estimated personal fortune of over $80 million. A key part of his success came from pioneering hydroelectric power ventures. He helped develop a massive power project at Shawinigan Falls in Canada, harnessing water power for electricity on a grand scale. He also led a $50 million investment syndicate to establish utility companies in Europe, notably in northern Italy. He even dabbled outside the utility world. Remarkably, Aldred served as chairman of the Gillette Safety Razor Company in the late 1920s, showing the breadth of his business interest. With great success came the means to live lavishly, and so, like many Gilded Age tycoons, John set out to build a country estate that would reflect his wealth and personal taste. The story of Ormston House begins around 1910, when Aldred and a close friend, lawyer William T. Guthrie, decided to establish grand homes on Long Island's North Shore. In an audacious move, Aldred, Guthrie, and a few other wealthy associates, including figures like Henry P. Davison and George F. Baker, essentially bought out nearly the entire hamlet of Laddingtown, New York. The group purchased about 400 acres of land and in the process demolished some 60 existing houses and buildings to clear the way for their estates. Aldred later quipped, "Mr. Guthrie and I destroyed the village of Laddingtown to get the view we wanted," a remark that became part of local folklore. It may sound ruthless, but such was the determination of these millionaires to craft their own private domains by the sea. On Aldred's portion of the land, perched near Long Island Sound, construction of his estate began in earnest a few years later. He named it Ormston, reportedly a family name important to him, giving the estate a personal touch. Work on the mansion started around 1916, and Aldred spared no expense in creating his version of paradise. For the design of the main house, he commissioned architect Bertram G. Goodhue. Goodhue was celebrated for his Gothic Revival designs. He co-designed St. Bartholomew's Church in New York City and other landmarks, and had recently branched out on his own to take on independent projects. At Ormston, Goodhue turned to the Tudor Revival style, drawing inspiration from the grand manor houses of Elizabethan England. The result was a sprawling, 74-room mansion built of solid stone and timber that evoked the feel of an old-world country house with modern American luxuries. The architecture of Ormston House is rich with period details. The structure was constructed of random coarse, quarry-faced limestone and topped with a heavy slate roof, lending it a sense of permanence and grandeur. Goodhue's design was not a strict copy of any one historic building, but rather a free Tudor interpretation, asymmetrical and bristling with character. The facade features numerous gables and about a dozen chimneys of different shapes. One especially striking element is the ornamented central entrance bay on the front facade, set in pale buff limestone that contrasts with the brown-gray stone of the main house. This entrance bay has a grand arched doorway embellished with Gothic carvings, above which a three-sided oriel window protrudes, complete with medieval-style tracery and decorative strapwork flourishes. Symmetrical twin staircases sweep up to a landing in front of the main entrance, creating a dramatic processional approach for guests arriving at the house. Inside, Ormston House was equally extravagant. Aldred wanted a home fit for entertaining dignitaries and friends, and the interior amenities reflected that. Visitors stepped into a large entry hall with a flagstone floor and dark wood paneling, which led into a soaring great hall nearly 2 stories high. The great hall was modeled after those in English manors. Its walls were lined with tall oak wainscoting and capped with blank masonry above, and sunlight poured in from full-length leaded windows. At one end of this hall stood a massive carved limestone fireplace and an elaborate walnut organ screen above. Yes, Aldred even installed a pipe organ in his home. Music would have filled the hall during grand parties, with the organ's pipes hidden behind Gothic-style wooden tracery. Adjoining the great hall was a more intimate morning room and a formal dining room, which boasted rich walnut paneling and a pattern-plastered ceiling decorated with Tudor rose and strapwork motifs in the English Renaissance style. In 1922, Aldred brought in architect Henry W. Rowe to make some updates, including alterations to woodwork in a few rooms. Rowe also designed some of the outbuildings, such as the stable and a gate cottage, helping to harmonize the entire property's design. Speaking of outbuildings, Ormston House was not just a single mansion, but practically a self-sufficient village of its own. Scattered around the 100-plus acre grounds were numerous support structures, all constructed in a complementary Tudor vernacular style. There were 2 gatehouses, one at each main entrance, built of fieldstone and half timbering, each looking like a charming English country cottage in its own right. A large stable and carriage house complex provided shelter for horses and vehicles, featuring steep gabled dormers and tall brick chimneys poking out of its tiled roof. A greenhouse and attached potting shed allowed for year-round cultivation of exotic plants, built with brick half-timber walls and a glasshouse wing. There was also a henhouse for fresh eggs, a dairy farm building, garages for newfangled motor cars with space for 4 autos, quite impressive for the 1910s, and various sheds and utility structures, even a picturesque well house, all styled to match the estate's Tudor theme. Perhaps most enchanting, a gazebo with a copper dome supported by classical columns stood on the lawn, offering a spot to enjoy breezes off the Sound. In total, Aldridge's estate had all the amenities one could expect of a country gentleman's seat, and then some. Yet the crowning glory of Ormston may well have been its landscape and gardens. John Aldred was very particular about the grounds. He wanted them laid out like an English parkland to remind him of a grand old estate in the countryside of Britain. For this, he hired the Olmsted Brothers, the famed landscape architecture firm founded by the sons of Frederick Law Olmsted, designer of Central Park. From 1912 to 1918, the Olmsted Brothers carefully shaped the 112-acre property into a series of formal gardens, recreational facilities, and naturalistic areas. Immediately around the mansion, they created formal walled gardens inspired by 17th century English designs. A central rectangular garden greeted visitors in the forecourt, introduced by a vine-covered pergola and bordered by manicured hedges. In the middle stood an elegant fountain splashing water into a stone basin, an eye-catching centerpiece amid beds of flowering plants. Nearby were curated spaces like a rose garden, a lilac walk, and even an Elizabethan-style topiary garden dotted with statues, reportedly supervised by Mrs. Aldred herself. It was said that over $200,000 was spent on the landscaping alone, including importing the first cedars of Lebanon ever planted on Long Island, a truly exotic touch at the time. Further from the house, the estate had more leisurely pursuits laid out. Aldred's plan, as documented by the Olmsteds, included 2 tennis courts placed just beyond a stand of oak trees and connected by a broad green lawn that stretched towards the woods. A covered bathhouse was built by the beach so that the family and guests could enjoy swimming in the Sound with privacy and comfort. Long grassy alleys and winding paths threaded through the property, blending formal gardens into the more natural woodlands at the edges. To ensure complete privacy, Aldred even built a 10-foot-high stone wall around most of the perimeter of his estate, with sturdy wrought iron gates at the entrances. Ormston was designed to be a world unto itself, a place where John Aldred could live out his vision of genteel country life, entertain high society, and survey his domain by the sea. By around 1918, Ormston House was largely complete, and it stood as one of the most impressive of the Gold Coast mansions. The final price tag for the project was rumored to be nearly $3 million, the modern equivalent of around $64 million. While the house and gardens were the epitome of luxury, maintaining them was a massive undertaking. Aldred reportedly employed a household staff of around 60 people to keep everything running, from gardeners and grooms to maids and cooks. For over 2 decades, Ormston was a glittering scene of garden parties, family gatherings, and the day-to-day life of a millionaire's family. But the good times on the Gold Coast were not to last forever, and John Aldred's fortunes were about to change in a dramatic way. After the 1929 stock market crash and the ensuing Great Depression, many wealthy elites saw their financial empires shaken. Aldred initially still appeared to be riding high in the early 1930s. After all, he commissioned the Aldred Building, a landmark Art Deco skyscraper in Montreal in 1930. But several forces converged to undermine his holdings in the following years. One major blow was the onset of World War II, which devastated Aldred's overseas investments. The utility companies he had financed in Italy, for example, were essentially lost when war broke out in Europe in 1939. Closer to home, regulatory changes also unraveled Aldred's complex business network. New Deal-era legislation, such as the Federal Power Act and stricter antitrust regulations, targeted the kind of sprawling utility conglomerates that Aldred had built. These laws prohibited the kind of interlocking corporate directorships and monopolistic arrangements that allowed one tycoon to control dozens of utility companies. As a result, Aldred was forced to break up or relinquish control of many of his enterprises in the early 1940s. Aldred had poured a fortune into Ormston House, but by the 1940s it turned into a heavy financial burden. Faced with mounting debts and shrinking income, Aldred was left with no other option than to auction off his prized art collection and much of the mansion's opulent furnishings. Not long after, John Aldred could no longer afford to keep Ormston House at all, and he defaulted on the estate. In 1942, Aldred's beloved Ormston was put on the market, marking the end of an era. Stripped of most of its fine art and furnishing, the great house went dark. In 1944, the property was purchased at a foreclosure sale by the Basilian Fathers of St. Josephat, a Ukrainian Catholic monastic order. The Basilian monks renamed the site St. Josaphat's Monastery, and thus a lavish Jazz Age estate quietly transitioned into a house of prayer. Today, the monastery continues to own the property and utilize the main house. Very few changes, if any, have been made to the public rooms, and the finishes appear mostly as they did in the days of John Aldred. Can you imagine building a 70,000 square foot mansion just to use as a weekend getaway? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're visiting the Vanderbilt family's idle hour. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. William K. Vanderbilt was the grandson of the legendary Commodore Cornelius Vanderbilt, whose railroad empire catapulted the family into immense wealth. By the late 1800s, William sought a country retreat away from the bustling life outside of his petit chateau on Manhattan's Fifth Avenue. He already had a summer cottage in Newport, but he wanted something close that he could slip away to on a whim. Drawn by Oakdale's charm and the leisure pursuits offered by the Southside Sportsman's Club, he decided to build a cabin in the woods, so to say, on nearby Long Island. With discretion necessary to avoid inflating local property prices, he assembled an impressive 862-acre estate dense with lush forest and unspoiled ponds. In 1878, Vanderbilt commissioned renowned architect Richard Morris Hunt to create the first iteration of Idle Hour, a stunning wooden Tudor Revival mansion. Lavish gatherings, grand parties, and leisurely weekends defined life at this retreat. However, tragedy struck in 1899 when the mansion burned to the ground during the honeymoon of Vanderbilt's son, although thankfully no one was harmed. Undeterred, Vanderbilt swiftly rebuilt, determined this time to make Idle Hour entirely fireproof. He enlisted Richard Morris Hunt's son, Richard Helland Hunt, to design a new residence that would rise like a phoenix from the ashes. Completed in 1901, this second mansion became an architectural marvel crafted from red tapestry brick, sandstone, and marble, epitomizing the refined English country aesthetic. Ensuring disaster would never strike again, Vanderbilt even installed underground tunnels to supply electricity and steam heat from a separate power plant far removed from the main house. Idle Hour became a favorite spot for high society, hosting both elaborate parties and quiet weekends spent fishing and boating from Vanderbilt's private mahogany dock. The estate even boasted an indoor tennis court designed by the famed architectural firm Warren & Wetmore, featuring ivy-clad walls and cooling stone fountains, a true rarity at the time. Idle Hour's interiors exuded sophistication, showcasing intricately carved woodwork imported from France, 24-karat gold accents, and walls draped in lavish silk tapestries and velvet. The mansion featured 110 meticulously designed rooms, each space embodying Vanderbilt's taste for European luxury. Entering the mansion, we swing open the heavy double doors and step into the vestibule clad floor to ceiling in marble. Directly ahead of us, we see the view that was planned by the architect for the hall. William wanted something a bit less formal, so the barrel-vaulted ceiling was ditched in favor of exposed wood beams. As we move in closer, we get a glimpse of the grand staircase twisting beyond the arcade. We'll get a much better look at this later when we head upstairs. For now, we'll turn to the right, where we see how the architect imagined the living hall. Here, William chose to stay pretty true to the initial design. Large windows flank each wall, allowing natural light to add depth to the artisan plaster ceilings appearing to pierce the air above us. But perhaps the most eye-catching element in this room is the fireplace at the very end, which includes the bellows of a built-in pipe organ, which is hidden away behind the chimney. To the right of the fireplace, we find the white and gold salon, with intricate plasterwork gilded with 24-karat gold. Had we gone to the other side of the fireplace, we would have found the library with built-in bookcases crowned by intricate carvings. We're now going to make a circle around the courtyard, following the cloister all the way to the end. This leads us to the palm court, where tropical plants could be grown year-round in high humidity. The tennis courts we saw earlier extend off the back of the palm court, as well as guest rooms for William's bachelor friends. Let's take a quick look at the floor plan once again, just to orient ourselves and make our way down the other cloister back towards the main house. Once here, we find a long corridor and follow it until we see an opening beyond a Gothic screen. This leads us into the smoking room, which could also be set up as a game room and billiards room. We can imagine William hanging out here with guests, having cigars over a game of cards after a long day of fishing. Continuing down the corridor, we head back towards the hall to find the dining room as our last stop on the first floor. While this small table might look a little silly in this grand space, it could seat dozens of guests when all the leaves were fitted to the table. The centerpiece of this room was the fireplace, which featured a finely sculpted figure of Diana, the Roman goddess associated with the hunt, rendered in brilliant white marble. Finally, we've come full circle in the house, stepping back out into the hall. As promised, we'll continue towards the grand staircase to see one of the most inspired architectural wonders in the house. The newel post is crowned by a grotesque, rising proudly above intricate carvings with a centuries-old European tapestry acting as its backdrop. As we head up a few stairs, we pass behind the gargoyle and get a closer look at the incredible woodwork all around us, taking inspiration from the Jacobean style, all being composed of quartered oak. Reaching the top of the staircase, we'll take a look at the floor plan for this level before continuing on, noting that it consists primarily of just bedrooms. Just as an example of what the bedrooms look like, they were all finished out with only the most fashionable furnishings at the time, with more than enough space to spread out. After Vanderbilt's passing in 1920, Idlehour witnessed a colorful history. It briefly became a haven for bohemian artists, and even played host to notorious gangster Dutch Schultz during Prohibition. Later in 1963, the estate transitioned into an educational institution, serving as Dowling College until its closure in 2016. Despite surviving another significant fire in 1974, Idlehour today faces the ongoing threat of neglect or alteration. Thankfully, recent preservation efforts by the town of Islip have placed additional protective zoning on the property, ensuring Idlehour's historic legacy continues for future generations. Today, Idlehour remains a remarkable symbol of the grandeur of a bygone era, echoing the fascinating story of one family's ambition, their unparalleled wealth, and the captivating allure of Long Island as an idyllic weekend retreat. The 72,000 square foot Innisfada, one of Long Island's most remarkable mansions, was once the grand estate of Nicholas Brady and his deeply religious wife Genevieve. Built between 1916 and 1920, Innisfada was situated in North Hills and became known not only for its sheer size, but for its extraordinary detail and craftsmanship. Designed by Philadelphia architect John T. Wyndham, the mansion featured 87 rooms situated on 300 acres of lush land. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Nicholas Brady, born into immense wealth, was the son of wealthy industrialist Anthony N. Brady. Nicholas, who had converted to Catholicism in order to marry Genevieve, dedicated himself to philanthropic endeavors and deeply supported the Catholic Church. His commitment earned him recognition from the Vatican, including a rare honorific title of Papal Duke. Genevieve became a papal duchess in her own right, renowned for her extensive charitable work and notable positions in organizations such as the Girl Scouts and the Welfare Council of New York. Those details will be important as we explore Innisfada. The mansion seemed to meander on, with exquisite masonry work leading the eye up to dozens of chimneys appearing to pierce the clouds. Each and every face of the home was given the utmost attention to craftsmanship and precision. From stained glass windows framed by limestone to crenellated towers, the mansion was said to rival England's largest manor houses. All about the main house, formal gardens were planned to slowly graduate into lush forest. From the short side of the mansion, we can look up from the reflecting pool to see towers fading off in the distance. And as we continue further away, we step down into terrace gardens. The greenhouse would ensure that a never-ending cycle of fresh flowers could be brought into the house. The garage was essentially its own mansion to house the Brady's collection of automobiles, and the pool house is where memories were made. But we didn't come here for the grounds necessarily, we came to explore the mansion. Pulling up the long drive, we skirt by the left wing of the mansion, rounding the lawns towards the porte-cochere. Once here, we can make our way towards the front door, which is surrounded by incredibly intricate limestone relief work. Heading inside, we enter the vestibule, where we are met with polished stone walls reflecting the flickering flame of the inglenook. Straight ahead and beyond a gallery, we find the grand staircase with deep steps almost making it appear stretched out. As our gaze continues upwards, we see vibrant antique European tapestries hanging on the walls. Now had we turned just after the vestibule, this is the view of the gallery we would have had, with rich oak paneling and a dizzying plaster ceiling barreling overhead. The first public room we'll explore is the Great Hall, rising nearly 4 stories to its peak. Once again, we find European tapestries hung on the walls and elaborate trusses supporting the ceiling. The scale of this room is simply so large that as we take several steps forward, nothing seems to change. Let's move another 20 or so feet in to get a better look at the fireplace, admiring the delicate detailing along the mantel. To truly appreciate how large the fireplace is, here we see Mrs. Brady entertaining the Pope in the Great Hall. Without the furniture, we lose reverence for the scale. However, in this photo we can see the series of leaded bay windows beyond stone arches which allow this cavernous room to be filled with natural light. From here we'll make our way over to the billiards room, where I want to call special attention to the inglenook, where it's almost like you sit below the upper mantel to enjoy the warmth of the fire. From the gallery, we will make our way through the double doors to find the dining room. Clad in wood paneling, which is broken up by pilasters, our eyes once again drift upwards to find elaborate plasterwork framing an intricate ceiling mural. And as you can imagine, the Bradys had nearly 100 full-time staff members to take care of everything, including cooking their every meal. In breaking with the dark woods we've been seeing throughout, the drawing room or salon is painted in a creamy off-white. but as we find the library, we return to this rich dark woodwork and heavily striated polished stone. Not every room was quite as grand. The living room was set on a more comfortable scale for daily use, though it still boasted the same level of craftsmanship with wood-paneled walls and built-ins. Even the lesser salon was scaled down for comfort, though it would have been considered beyond grand in just about any other home from this time period. As mentioned earlier, Mrs. Brady was deeply religious, and to her this meant having a private chapel inside of the house. This is perhaps one of the more heavily embellished rooms where she was known to spend a lot of time. Carvings and paintings depicted everything from saints to the Stations of the Cross, and from Gothic tracery to wooden vines appearing to free themselves from the walls. Let's return now to the grand staircase and continue exploring from the second floor. As we reach the landing, we get a really good view of the artisan touches along the newel post and balustrade. Let's continue up. The first bedroom we'll see is Mrs. Brady, styled with a mix of new and centuries-old furnishings to lend to the aesthetic. Her suite came complete with a private bathroom and a dressing room. There are simply too many bedrooms in this mansion to run through, so we'll see some of the more interesting rooms such as the small Gothic bedroom and the Chinese bedroom, understanding that each guest suite was themed around various cultures and time periods. The mansion continues on, with dozens of rooms that might have never even been photographed. Following Nicholas Brady's unexpected passing, Genevieve donated the estate to the Jesuits in 1937. The mansion, with its intricate woodwork and vast chapel dedicated to St. Genevieve, initially served as a seminary and later, starting in 1963, became the St. Ignatius Retreat House. Almost no changes were made to the mansion other than changing out the furnishings to be more conducive to a religious retreat center. These color photos we are seeing were taken by the late John Foreman of Big Old Houses, showing just how spectacular the house appeared more recently. However, financial considerations led the Jesuits to sell Esfada in 2013. After intense local efforts to preserve the mansion failed, the property was sold for development, and demolition began in December of 2013. Today, the once magnificent estate is replaced by modern homes, marking the loss of one of Long Island's architectural treasures. In the 1930s, Ruby Ross Wood was undisputably the most famous interior designer of her time, creating rooms for America's wealthiest families, including the Vanderbilts and Astors. But for as grand as some of her designs were, Ruby's personal home was truly a treasure trove of creative thinking. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Ruby's path to decorating fame began far from the gilded halls of New York. She was born Ruby Ross Pope in 1881 in Monticello, Georgia, the daughter of a cotton broker and a family with proud colonial American roots. Despite her genteel lineage, Ruby's childhood in the South was a world away from the cosmopolitan design circles she would later dominate. As a young woman with a creative spark, Ruby initially pursued writing. In the early 1900s, she moved to New York City and then Boston to work as a journalist, writing fiction, poetry, and magazine articles. A turning point came in 1910 when Ruby landed an unusual writing gig, ghostwriting for the legendary decorator Elsie de Wulf. De Wulf was among America's first famous interior designers, and she needed help penning articles about decorating. Ruby's task was to translate de Wulf's lectures into engaging articles for The Delineator, a popular women's magazine. She did such a good job that those articles became the basis for de Wulf's influential book, The House in Good Taste, a cornerstone of early 20th century interior design literature. Through this project, Ruby absorbed de Wulf's design philosophy and made valuable connections in high society. It was an ironic start. The woman who had become a celebrated designer got her first big break writing under someone else's name, but it set the stage for her own voice to emerge. Armed with knowledge and growing passion, Ruby tried to strike out on her own in design. In 1913, she published The Honest House, a book on tasteful homemaking, but it met with only modest success. Undeterred, she boldly opened a decorating business called the Modernist Studio around 1914, hoping to introduce cutting-edge European modern design to New York. This venture proved ahead of its time. Most New Yorkers weren't ready for such experimental decor, and the business failed. Ruby's first true foot in the door came soon after, in a more traditional setting. She joined the venerable John Wanamaker department store in New York, where she took over the interior decorating studio known as Belle Maison. Starting in 1918, Ruby managed this elite design salon, and for the next few years, she honed her craft decorating model rooms and advising wealthy clients through Wanamakers. This job was a crash course in the practical side of interior design, from sourcing antiques and fabrics to pleasing demanding patrons, and it expanded her network of suppliers and society clients. By the late 1920s and 1930s, Ruby Ross Wood had built a thriving decorating empire, counting some of America's richest families among her clientele. She worked on homes for names like the Vanderbilts and Blairs, a sure sign that she had arrived at the top of her profession. Ruby's design philosophy and personality set her apart from her peers. She believed that creating a beautiful room was as much an art as a science. famously declaring, "The final judgment in decorating is not the logic of the mind, but the logic of the eye." In other words, trust your taste over any rigid rules, a principle that resonated with her affluent clients who wanted homes that were elegant but also personal. Her rooms often balance comfort with a sense of history. She might pair a sleek contemporary lamp with a Louis XVI chair, or lay a bold Moroccan rug under Chippendale tables. This blend of old-world charm and select modern touches gave her interiors a timeless, curated quality that drew admirers. In 1927, Ruby and her husband, Chalmers Wood, commissioned what would become Little Ipswich, a mansion set on 43 acres of lush land in Woodbury, Long Island. The estate's whimsical name, Little Ipswich, was a nod to Chalmers Wood's boyhood home of Ipswich, Massachusetts, but there was nothing little about the project's ambitions. Ruby, ever the design connoisseur, took an active role in planning the house, ensuring it would be a showplace for both architecture and interior design. To bring their vision to life, the Woods hired the prominent New York firm of Delano and Aldrich, renowned for elegant classical architecture. Ruby had clear ideas and even gave the architects historic inspiration. One striking feature of Little Ipswich is that it was built entirely on one level, a sprawling one-story mansion stretching out amid the gardens. This was at Ruby's insistence, as she desired soaring ceilings in every room without the interruption of an upper floor. Inside Little Ipswich, Ruby Ross Wood's knack for dramatic yet livable interiors was on full display. Visitors stepping through the front door found themselves in an awe-inspiring central hall beneath the Great Dome. The rotunda-like foyer was laid out with perfect symmetry, harkening back to classical ideals of design. Beyond the foyer, each room in Little Ipswich reflected Ruby's curated, cosmopolitan style. The living room, for instance, was legendary among her circle. It featured walls paneled in wood up to the ceiling, with delicate carvings and built-in shelves that displayed Ruby's treasured collection of Chinese figurines and old porcelain. Rather than sticking to one period or style, Ruby mixed furnishings from various eras and origins. A French director chair, circa 1790, upholstered in old tapestry, sat comfortably near an Italian lacquer cabinet with brass lions head pulls. On the other side, an English Regency Meridian sofa covered in rich maroon brocade held court, piled with satin and velvet pillows for comfort. The color scheme of deep maroons, soft tans, and beiges was pulled together by an exquisite Aubusson carpet, one of several in Ruby's possession, woven with swan and scroll patterns that echoed the home's recurring motif. In the library, she wrapped all four walls in floor-to-ceiling pine bookcases, unifying all the vertical elements with a band of uninterrupted dentil molding. Once again, we see mixed and matched styles spanning centuries and regions apart, all coming together to create a sophisticated and eclectic environment. Ruby's own bedroom in the mansion was another showplace of personal luxury. She capitalized on the high ceilings to create a Tremont effect, placing a large mirror and a carved relief panel above the fireplace like one might see in an old Parisian townhouse. The floor of her bedroom was itself a conversation piece. Oak planks salvaged from a French manor house arranged in an inlaid geometric pattern with strips of white olive wood and ebony. Ruby's story, however, met an all-too-human ending. In the late 1940s, her health began to decline. She had been a lifelong chain smoker and tragically passed of lung cancer in 1950 at the age of 68. But the mansion itself lived on, at least for a few more decades. In 1995, despite any efforts or hopes for preservation, the estate was demolished to make way for modern development. The once sprawling 43 acres of lawns and gardens were subdivided, and eventually a neighborhood known as the Peroni Estates was built on the land. Over 100 years ago, long before capes and spandex filled the big screen, Street and Smith was shaping the very blueprint of the modern superhero. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're jumping off to Long Island to uncover the origins of action-packed comic book heroes at Shoremond. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1860, Ormond Smith was born into a family already deeply involved in the publishing trade. His father, Francis Smith, had co-founded the New York publishing firm Street and Smith in 1855 alongside partner Francis Street. Growing up under the wing of a publishing pioneer, Ormond was primed to continue the family legacy. He received an elite education, graduating from Harvard University in 1883 and joining his father's firm immediately after college. Ormond's entry into the business coincided with a period of transition. Street and Smith's co-founder, Francis Street, had passed away that same year, and Ormond's own father passed away in 1887. At just 27 years old, Ormond stepped into a leadership role and succeeded his father as head of the company. The company's output spanned a wide range of genres and formats, from weekly story papers to glossy magazines. Street and Smith's New York Weekly, in which the first Nick Carter detective story appeared in 1886, was an early staple, and they soon branched into standalone series and monthlies. Many of the magazines and pulps that flourished under Smith's leadership became household names in their day. For example, the Popular magazine was one of the first general fiction pulp magazines and carried everything from adventure tales to early science fiction. Street and Smith were also trendsetters in targeting specific audiences. They published Top Notch magazine, an action and sports story magazine for young men, Ainsley's Magazine, a fictional magazine with high-quality short stories, and Picture Play Magazine, a fan magazine devoted to the burgeoning Hollywood film industry. These titles, among others, cemented Street & Smith's reputation for knowing the pulse of the pop culture market. Perhaps most famously, Street & Smith pioneered the specialization of pulp fiction into distinct genres, each with its own dedicated magazine. They were early to recognize that readers crave category-specific stories, whether westerns, detective mysteries, romance, or science fiction. The company's Western dime novels and pulps were especially influential. Ned Buntline's Buffalo Bill Cody Adventures, published by Street & Smith, were wildly popular and helped mythologize the American Wild West. In 1915, Street & Smith launched Detective Story magazine, the first pulp magazine devoted entirely to crime and detective fiction, which became the archetype for a new genre of mystery periodicals. Street & Smith also innovated by creating magazines centered on recurring heroes, essentially the bridge from dime novel serial characters to the iconic pulp heroes of the 1930s. Under Orman's watch, the firm introduced The Shadow in 1931, the first pulp magazine to focus on a single fictional character's ongoing exploits. In short, during Orman G. Smith's tenure, Street & Smith grew into a powerhouse of popular publishing. This publishing empire not only made Smith a media mogul, but a very wealthy man. By the 1910s, with his business prospering, he set his sights on creating a country estate befitting a man of his stature. In 1912, he purchased a 74-acre waterfront tract on Center Island, a peninsula projecting into Long Island's Oyster Bay that was becoming dotted with grand mansions. Smith commissioned the prominent architectural firm Hoppen & Cohen to design a magnificent mansion on the site. The result was an imposing Georgian-style manor house constructed of red brick and limestone, situated about 125 feet back from the bluff to command panoramic water views. Smith initially christened the home Gracecliff, perhaps in honor of his wife Grace, though he later renamed it Shoremont, incorporating his own name into the estate. Completed in 1914, Shoremont immediately earned renown as one of the most impressive estates on Long Island's North Shore. The mansion reportedly boasted 12 bedrooms and extensive formal rooms, providing ample space for high society gatherings and family life alike. Beyond the main house, the estate was practically self-sufficient. The grounds included a large carriage house and garage, a caretaker's cottage, a dairy facility, its own waterworks, and even a private sewage treatment system. Elaborate gardens were laid out with terraced walled gardens and formal parterres, creating a lush, manicured environment that complemented the house's refined architecture. Let's return around to the south facade and begin making our way up the steps and through the portico. Before we head inside, we'll take a quick look at the floor plan to better orient ourselves, noting that we will be entering the house below the grand staircase and traveling towards the Great Hall. As we begin looking around, this is our first view into the two-story Great Hall, complete with gilded plasterwork, marble columns, and carved balustrades skirting the upper level. Now we can turn around and see the front door where we first entered, tucked away below the grand bifurcated staircase, which reportedly boasted intricate runners over its solid marble slab steps. To the right of the Great Hall we find the dining room, with rich wood paneling framed by dramatic marble pilasters. Through the open door, we can catch a glimpse of the breakfast room. To the other side of the Great Hall, we find the boudoir, and though it was originally planned to be the music room, the ladies of the house required a larger entertaining space. Directly across the gallery, we find the men's reception room, and can quickly see why such a room of limited space simply would not have worked for the women of that era in their big dresses. Let's continue down the gallery until it terminates in the loggia. Here we find what the couple referred to as the trellis room, aptly named for its decor. This would have been used as a tranquil escape where running water could have been heard trickling from the fountains and where the sweet smell of potted flowers kept the ambiance peaceful all year long. In the spring of 1920, Orman made the surprising decision to part with Shoremont. The buyer was John North Willys, a prominent automobile manufacturer of Willys Overland Motors, famed for later producing Jeeps. As the Great Depression kicked off, the mansion changed hands several more times until it was eventually demolished in the 1940s. Interestingly, large portions of the house were dumped over the cliff, with architectural fragments washing up on the shores of Long Island for decades following its demolition. Of Long Island's many lost Gilded Age mansions, Rosemary Farm sticks out as a unique experiment in living. With a theater boasting seating for 3,000 guests, complete with its own moat, to unconventional uses for European architectural salvage, this is one of the most unique setups we've seen from this period. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Roland Conklin's journey to fortune began far from Long Island. Born in Urbana, Illinois in 1858, he graduated from the University of Illinois in 1880 and headed west to Kansas City. There he teamed up with his brother Stanley and partner Samuel Jarvis to ride the era's real estate boom. They co-founded the Jarvis Conklin Mortgage and Trust Company, which rapidly grew by financing and developing new residential neighborhoods on the American frontier. In Kansas City, Missouri, their firm is credited with developing the Hyde Park district into other upscale subdivisions. But they didn't stop there. Jarvis Conklin expanded into Cleveland and even helped create Roland Park in Baltimore, one of the nation's first planned garden suburbs. At its height, the company was so ambitious it opened an overseas branch in London in 1889, becoming one of the first American banks with an international office. This rapid expansion hit a wall with the Panic of 1893, a financial crisis that wreaked havoc on railroads and real estate ventures nationwide. Jarvis Conklin Mortgage and Trust collapsed in the aftermath, wiping out Conklin's initial fortune. Yet he proved resilient, and by 1896 he had reorganized the remnants of his business into a new venture, the North American Trust Company, and moved operations to New York City. Good timing and Conklin's bold vision turned this setback into an even greater opportunity. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, the United States needed financial infrastructure in its new territories, and Conklin's firm was appointed the official U.S. fiscal agent in Cuba. He relocated to Havana and oversaw the founding of the first American bank there, the National Bank of Cuba, along with the island's telephone companies and even railroads. In effect, he helped build Cuba's transportation and communications networks in the early 1900s, vastly enlarging his wealth and influence. This cosmopolitan period set the stage for Conklin's next act back in the US, where he would channel his fortune into an estate of almost theatrical grandeur. By the turn of the 20th century, Roland Conklin was ready to establish a permanent home befitting his success. In 1893, amid his New York banking ventures, Conklin purchased 200 acres of hilly woodland in Lloyd Harbor, Long Island, as the site for a country estate. For about a decade, he left the acreage largely untouched, but around 1906, he embarked on creating his dream home. He commissioned noted Philadelphia architect Wilson Eyre to design a grand residence atop the highest hill, one that would command sweeping views of Cold Spring Harbor and the Long Island Sound. Construction was completed by 1907, and Conklin named the property Rosemary Farm, a sentimental choice honoring his young daughter Rosemary. The main house was a sprawling red brick mansion of approximately 30 rooms, blending Georgian and classical elements. Period descriptions praised its gracious design. Sleeping porches and terraces took in sea breezes, and imported European antiques, from Italian marble doorways to a Portuguese church organ, filled its halls. With the mansion complete, Conklin turned to landscaping the grounds on a lavish scale. He and his wife Mary, herself a former opera singer, were avid patrons of the arts. They envisioned their estate not just as a private retreat, but as a place for culture and entertainment among friends. Conklin hired the Olmsted brothers to design formal gardens and improve the rolling landscape. The defining feature of Rosemary Farm, and Conklin's most ambitious addition, was the open-air amphitheater he built in the estate's natural bowl. Around 1912, his wife expressed a desire to host a grand theatrical and musical performance for their circle of friends, many of whom were leading actors, conductors, and singers of the day. Seizing on the idea, Conklin decided to transform a deep ravine southwest of the mansion into a massive outdoor theater. The plans drawn up in 1912 envisioned semicircular grass seating terraces built into the hillside, accommodating nearly 3,000 spectators and separated from the stage by a water-filled moat. For the interior, countless revisions were made by the architect to suit the Conklin's grand plans for entertaining, with series after series of sketches to ensure perfection. The heart of the home would become the central hall, the largest room in the house where live music could ring out from the balcony above. In keeping with the home's theatrical flair, the grand staircase swept out of the entrance hall, going over a partition wall to cut through the living hall. Just below it, a built-in pipe organ would bellow music on any given night in the house, whether it was for a small dinner party or an event with thousands in attendance. Directly opposite, the floor-to-ceiling fireplace could consume entire trees within hours, keeping the atmosphere alive and the massive space warm. Next, we'll head over to the library, which also went through a series of designs as the architect and Conklins went back and forth on how to best incorporate their collection of European architectural salvage. The result, much like the final sketches, included an arcade that was repurposed in each archway to hold a doorway, a fireplace, and a bookshelf. Though of utmost importance was probably the music room, which could be filled with opera singers and orchestras when their outdoor concerts would be rained out. Let's skip over to the breakfast room and head below a colonnade of serpentine columns, adorned with delicately carved wooden flowers. This brings us to the dining room, set below a Jacobean ceiling and anchored on a salvaged European white marble fireplace mantel. We can get a close look at this, admiring the mantel's centuries-old scrollwork and noting that the family still had it installed with its chips and cracks left unrepaired, truly showcasing its age. Upstairs, the creativity and unconventional design choices continue into the couple's bedroom, first and foremost for the time period being that they share this room instead of keeping separate beds. Second, to maximize natural light, the walls were covered in windows, leaving the only large enough space to display their antique tapestries up in the rafters of the hammer beam ceiling. Unfortunately, Mary passed away in 1919 at only 48 years old. Without her, the grand home they had created together lost much of its charm for him. Conklin's children were growing up, and he began withdrawing from the high society life at Rosemary Farm, and not long after, he decided to give up the estate entirely. In 1920, he arranged to transfer Rosemary Farm to the Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn. By 1924, the deal was finalized, and construction began to convert the property into the Seminary of the Immaculate Conception. Meanwhile, Conklin picked up an earlier project that he had tinkered on in his free time and went full speed ahead with promoting the Rolling Gas Electric Vehicle Company, which he had founded in 1913 to build innovative gasoline-electric buses. He also continued his philanthropy. Notably, Conklin had donated the iconic alma mater statue that graces the University of Illinois campus in 1919, and after a fit of pneumonia, he passed away in 1938. Over the following decades, Rosemary Farm's legacy as a private estate had largely faded until an unfortunate event brought it back into the headlines. In December 1990, just as the diocese was considering selling the old Conklin mansion to private buyers, tragedy struck. The vacant mansion was largely destroyed in a fire set by vandals. In the early 1900s, millionaire heir J. Phipps made a romantic promise to his bride-to-be. He would build her an American estate worth leaving Europe for. Hi everyone, Ken here. Comment what you like most about each room as we go through, and without further ado, let's explore this house. In 1874, J. Phipps was born into one of the wealthiest families in America. He was the eldest son of Henry Phipps, a self-made steel tycoon who had been a close business partner of the legendary Andrew Carnegie. Henry Phipps' involvement in Carnegie Steel, later U.S. Steel, made him enormously wealthy, amassing a fortune by the turn of the century. As an heir to the Phipps family fortune, young Jay enjoyed a privileged upbringing full of lavish mansions and a top-notch education at Yale. But he was not merely a passive heir. He trained as a lawyer and developed into a shrewd financier and businessman in his own right. By the early 1900s, the Phipps family had relocated from Pittsburgh to New York City, seeking new opportunities and a higher social profile. J. Phipps embodied this era's elite lifestyle. He was social, sporty, and philanthropic, active in pursuits like polo and thoroughbred horse racing, and an integral part of Long Island's high society. He served as a director on corporate boards, including Hanover National Bank, U.S. Steel Corporation, and W.R. Grace & Co., leveraging both his inherited wealth and his own business acumen. In short, J. Phipps had both the means and the ambition to leave a mark on the world, and a stage was set on the North Shore of Long Island. In 1903, Jay's life took a romantic turn that would spark the creation of his greatest legacy. That year, he married Margarita Grace, the daughter of Anglo-Irish shipping magnate Michael P. Grace. Before marrying, Jay had promised his English bride that he would build her a splendid home in America to rival the stately estates of Britain. He intended his new mansion to ease her transition across the Atlantic by recreating the grandeur of her old home. Jay wasted no time fulfilling his vow. In 1901, even before the wedding, he had purchased a 160-acre former Quaker farm in the village of Old Westbury on Long Island. By 1903, the year of their marriage, work on the estate was underway. Jay enlisted a talented English artist and designer, George A. Crawley, to conceive the mansion and gardens that would transform the humble farmland into a palatial country retreat. Crawley, who had a background in art and history but no formal architectural training, approached the project with an imaginative eye for historical grandeur. To ensure the plans were structurally sound and executed to perfection, the American architect G. Atterbury joined the effort, preparing technical drawings and specifications based on Crawley's vision. After about 3 years of intense work, the mansion was ready in 1906 for their growing young family. They named it Westbury House after the local area, and true to his word, Jay had given his bride a piece of England on American soil, a house and garden as beautiful as those she left behind. The Phipps family moved in and began what would be over 50 years of residence at this magnificent estate. Westbury House would soon become renowned as one of Long Island's greatest estates of the Gilded Age, a symbol of transatlantic love and limitless wealth set in stone, brick, and blossom. Architecturally, Westbury House is a Carolean Revival masterpiece, a tribute to the opulent Charles II-era country houses of 17th century England. The mansion's exterior exudes a dignified grandeur. It was constructed of warm honey-colored limestone and Virginia red clay brick laid in an eye-catching diaper pattern. The roof, with multiple gables at slightly varying heights, is clad in mellow-toned stone tiles, evoking the look of an Old English manor. Surrounding the mansion, George Crawley also laid out magnificent gardens and grounds that have become just as famous as the house itself. By 1907, the estate grounds already featured a polo field, tennis courts, a rose garden, and a charming latticework pavilion amid the flower beds. The formal gardens were carefully planned as an homage to the great gardens of Europe, with terraces, alleys of trees, and carefully placed sculptures creating focal points in the landscape. The southern terrace of the house was raised to overlook a great lawn flanked by rows of dogwoods, lindens, and hemlocks, offering a breathtaking vista from the house. Beyond the formal gardens lay woodlands, ponds, and lawns that were meticulously landscaped. In essence, the entire estate became a living work of art, incorporating elements of French and English garden design, from geometric boxwood parterres to meandering paths through wildflowers. Inside, the house was designed to transport the Phipps family and their guests into a world of Edwardian splendor from the moment they stepped into the entrance hall. Here you would find a massive stone fireplace rising from the floor to the ceiling, and beyond a colonnade, the grand staircase ascending behind delicate fretwork. Taking the door to the side of the fireplace, we step into the red ballroom, where we can imagine men and women dancing across the polished parquet floors in the height of Edwardian fashion. To one end, we follow the parquet floors into Jay's study, clad floor to ceiling in stately paneling, and all set below one of the most elaborate plaster ceilings we have ever seen on this channel, with delicate depictions of flowers and leaves overlapping each other as if though we are looking at the garden upside down. Beyond this, we travel further into the house to find the dining room, clad in rich wood paneling and traced by the glistening golden hues of gilded details flowing all about the room. Had we traveled instead to the other end of the ballroom, we would have waltzed into the white drawing room, aptly named for its white Corinthian columns, millwork, and paneling. Turning the corner, we open the doors to Mrs. Phipps's study, with floor-to-ceiling built-in bookcases lining the rooms below a domed ceiling. Over the years, Westbury House did not remain static. The Phipps family expanded, and so did their home. Additions in 1911 and 1924 enlarged the mansion, seamlessly blending with the original style. Notably, celebrated architect Horace Trumbauer was involved in later alterations, likely overseeing one of these extensions. Despite these enhancements, the integrity of Crawley's original design remained intact. Westbury House stood as a harmonious whole, a magnificent Charles II-style mansion furnished with treasures and set amid world-class gardens. Life at Old Westbury was grand, but it was only one part of Jay's luxurious lifestyle. As a man of great means and varied interests, Jay maintained multiple homes to suit different seasons and hobbies. In addition to their Long Island country estate, the Phipps family kept an elegant residence in New York City and later developed significant properties in the sunny climates of Florida and the rural heartland of Virginia. One of Jay's most notable ventures was in Palm Beach, Florida, which rose in the 1910s and 1920s as a winter playground for America's wealthiest families. There, Jay commissioned famed architect Addison Meisner, the visionary behind Palm Beach's Mediterranean revival style, to design an extravagant winter residence for his family. The resulting mansion, which Jay playfully named Casa Bendita, became one of Palm Beach's largest and finest homes. Its showpiece was an indoor swimming pool and a column pavilion, complete with an arched gallery and diving tower, which made headlines even before the house was finished. It's worth noting that despite living lavishly, Jay Phipps managed to maintain and even grow his wealth. In fact, he engaged in real estate development as well. For instance, in West Palm Beach, he subdivided land into what became the upscale Elstead Historic District, developing luxury residential neighborhoods in the 1920s. Tragically, Margarita passed away in 1957, just shy of her 81st birthday, and Jay, who had been her devoted partner for over half a century, followed her the next year. Unlike many titans of the Gilded Age who flamed out or lost their fortunes, Jay Phipps left an estate that was still largely intact along with a family committed to preserving it. One of Jay's enduring legacies was the notion of responsible stewardship. He had managed to hold on to Westbury House and its acres of gardens long after many other Long Island mansions had been sold off or demolished due to financial pressures. Jay and Margarita's children had grown up with a deep love for their childhood home, and they were determined to save it from the fate that befell so many other estates. The torch passed most directly to their only daughter, Margaret, who had a keen interest in horticulture and history. The steps she took in the years following 1958 would ensure that her parents' life's work would not be lost to time. Instead of selling the land to developers or letting the mansion crumble, the heirs transformed Westbury House and its gardens into a museum for the public. In 1959, barely a year after Jay's death, Margaret and her brothers established a nonprofit foundation to open Old Westbury Gardens to visitors. It was one of the earliest instances of a Gold Coast mansion being preserved this way, and it set a precedent for saving America's Gilded Age heritage. Margaret, who moved into a modest home on the property, became the founding president of Old Westbury Gardens and guided it for decades, right up until her own passing in 2006. Thanks to her dedication, the estate was lovingly maintained in nearly its original state and surrounded by the beautifully kept gardens that had matured over half a century. In fact, the cinematic quality of Old Westbury Gardens has not gone unnoticed by Hollywood. The mansion and its grounds have served as the backdrop for numerous films and TV shows over the years, from classic movies like North by Northwest to more recent television shows like Gossip Girl and Pushing Daisies. In popular culture, Old Westbury Gardens has come to symbolize the romance and grandeur of the Gilded Age, proving that Jay Phipps' creation still captures imaginations well into the 21st century. In the early 1900s, Long Island's North Shore glittered with the opulent estates of America's wealthiest families. One such showpiece was Burwood, the 40-room mansion of oil tycoon Walter Jennings. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Born in 1858 as the eldest son of Oliver Burr Jennings, a co-founder of Standard Oil, Walter grew up in privilege but also with powerful connections. He attended elite schools, Phillips Andover and then Yale University, where he became a member of the Skull and Bones Secret Society. Armed with a law degree from Columbia and impeccable social ties, Jennings followed his father's footsteps, embarking on a career in the booming oil and gas industry. By the turn of the century, Walter had firmly established himself as an influential industrialist. He served as a director and later secretary of Standard Oil of New Jersey, one of the principal companies of Rockefeller's oil empire, and from 1908 to 1919 was president of the National Fuel Gas Company. His business portfolio didn't stop there. Jennings sat on the board of the Bank of Manhattan and was a trustee of the New York Trust Company, forerunner of today's Chase Bank. In short, he was a key player in the Gilded Age world of oil, finance, and industry. This considerable fortune and status set the stage for Jennings to join his peers and a favorite pastime of the era's elite, building a magnificent country estate to escape the city's hustle. Between 1895 and 1898, Jennings quietly amassed around 374 acres of land in the Cold Springs Harbor area of Long Island to create his dream estate. He then commissioned the renowned architectural firm Carriere & Hastings to design an exquisite Georgian-inspired mansion on the property. This was the same firm behind landmarks like the New York Public Library and the Frick Mansion in Manhattan, so Burwood's pedigree was first class. For the grounds, Jennings brought in the Olmsted brothers, sons of Central Park designer Frederick Law Olmsted, to lay out elegant formal gardens around the new mansion. No expense was spared in crafting a country residence that would rival the finest estates of the day. But why name the estate Burwood? Walter Jennings claimed to be a direct descendant of Aaron Burr, the former U.S. vice president, and so he cheekily named his manor Burwood in honor of that lineage. The estate more than lived up to its lofty name. Burwood wasn't just a mansion, it was practically a self-sufficient village of luxury and productivity rolled into one. The main house itself was a 40-room Georgian mansion replete with grand halls and sumptuous details. We'll peek inside soon enough, but before we do, let's linger in the gardens a bit longer. The scenery was planned to set the stage for the estate from the moment cars passed by the gate and began pulling up the driveway. After traveling through an alley of trees, the grounds suddenly open up to formal gardens, with cars traveling around a sunken parterre garden complete with fountains and dozens of different types of flowers. Because we are exploring the grounds first, we can drop our car off at the carriage house where the staff will make sure to take good care of it. From here we can walk out to the farm group where we would see a fully functioning farm with horses and livestock. As we continue around the property, we come across large brick terraces and hear the trickling of fountains among the undisturbed chirping of birds. Then we re-emerge, seeing for the first time the rear of the house flanked by large loggias and joined by a glistening white balustrade running along the lower terrace. As we continue making a circle around the house, we see stately dormers piercing the roofline beyond rows of hedges. Finally, we find ourselves again staring at the main entrance from the sunken garden. Let's head in for a closer look. As we pass by the massive stone urns to approach the front door, we realize for the first time how large the mansion is, with perfectly scaled proportions meant to dwarf the human scale and a signature mark of Carriere & Hastings. Entering the mansion, we pass through the vestibule and head up a few steps to arrive in the reception hall. Our view now is looking back at the front door where the grand staircase turns above the vestibule behind richly ornamented columns. From here we make our way into the dining room, where rich wood paneling clads the walls. And though it may be hard to see, the panels are carved with delicate relief work tracing the room around to the fireplace, which is separated from the windows by fluted pilasters. Next we'll make our way into the library, with built-in bookshelves skirting the room at picture rail height, leaving an airy band of wallpaper to act as a frieze and join the room with a cohesive linear element. Life at Burwood rolled on blissfully for many years, but history had different plans for the world around Walter Jennings. The Great Depression struck in 1929, bringing an abrupt end to the carefree prosperity of the Roaring Twenties. The economic turmoil that followed would prove challenging for America's wealthy families, including the Jennings clan. Maintenance of huge estates like Burwood suddenly became far more difficult as income shrank and new taxes loomed. Nonetheless, Walter remained a man of considerable means and stature up to the end of his days. In 1933, he passed away at age 74, not at Burwood, but at his winter home on Jekyll Island in Georgia. In 1951, not long after Jennings' descendants put Burwood on the market, it was sold for a mere $90,000 to the Industrial Home for the Blind, a charitable organization. By the early 1980s, the maintenance expenses and staffing needs of Burwood were overwhelming the institution. The resident population was also dwindling as modern social services enabled people with disabilities to live more independently off campus. Ultimately, the organization closed the residence. Burwood, now aging and expensive to upkeep, was put up for sale again in 1987. There was nothing to stop developers from clearing away the old relic. Lacking any buyers or protections, Burwood's mansion was demolished in 1995, erasing the stately house from the landscape. Though the mansion's walls are gone, its tale endures as a piece of Long Island history, a reminder of the Gilded Age dream that once flourished on its shores and of how those golden dreams, like Burwood itself, ultimately faded into memory. One of Long Island's largest and most unique homes once mirrored an American fantasy of French aristocracy. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we're uncovering Chateau Ivor, the 1,000-acre estate of Charles Gould. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1849, Charles Gould was born in Batavia, New York, and like many Gilded Age titans, he didn't come from wealth. His early life was shaped by modest means and unexpected hardship. At just 20, he struck out on his own, heading to Buffalo in search of opportunity. He found his footing as an accountant and later became the deputy postmaster and collector of customs there. But Gould's true rise began in the world of industry. In 1891, with his life savings, he founded the Gould Coupler Company in Depew, New York, a manufacturer of railroad components that quickly became essential to the operations of the New York Central Railroad. He followed this up with the Gould Storage Battery Company in 1897, which produced batteries for everything from trains and elevators to electric farms. But Gould didn't just build products, he built empires. Through the Gould Securities Company and the Gould Realty Company, he managed substantial land holdings across New York City, including properties on Fifth Avenue. In 1907, as retail began replacing mansions along the famous avenue, Gould adapted. He commissioned Woodruff Leeming to convert his home at 714 Fifth Avenue into a commercial building that preserved the look of a private mansion. When French perfume magnate François Coty leased the building in 1910, he brought in none other than René Lalique to design a 3-story wall of Art Nouveau glass, a masterpiece that would become the building's crown jewel. Today, the preserved facade, known as the Coty Building, still hints at Gould's presence in the city's architectural legacy. But Gould's biggest architectural statement wasn't in the city, it was on Long Island. Around 1908, Gould commissioned architect John Russell Pope to design a grand estate on over 1,000 acres of prime countryside. Pope, who would go on to design the Jefferson Memorial, the National Gallery of Art, and other well-known sites, was known for blending historical European styles with American taste. For Gould, he crafted a French-inspired country house known as Chateau Ivor. It was stately, elegant, and a true reflection of the man who built it. Set on one of Long Island's highest points, Chateau Ivor stood as a 3-story Beaux-Arts manor house, complete with formal gardens laid out by the famed Olmsted brothers. Interestingly, Chateau Ivor wasn't Gould's first attempt at a country house. He had previously hired another architect, Abner J. Hayden, to design a castle-like mansion, but after a lawsuit over unpaid fees, those plans were scrapped. Pope's design proved far more timeless, even if the home itself wouldn't survive for long. As we pull around to the forecourt, there's something else you should know about the mansion. And as we make our way towards the front door, the placement of windows might lead you to believe that the rooms are somewhat small or thin, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The proportions were completely blown out, with doors and windows being greatly exaggerated in size. Inside, Gould filled the home with French antiques, imported to match the home's aristocratic flair. The mansion was a sporting retreat, a social hub, and a luxurious getaway. Gould regularly hosted hunting parties and lavish gatherings here, and escaped from the bustle of Manhattan life. The living room was the largest room on the first floor, finished out with wall panels and parquet flooring meant to match the scale of the home. It isn't until we see the room full of its original furnishings that we can grasp how truly large the space was. The dining room continued with these larger-than-life proportions, with a massive marble fireplace to anchor the room. The walls were clad with simple but refined painted paneling, avoiding the fussy details that were so popular in this time period. Now as we make our way back out towards the gallery, we'll pass by the grand marble staircase, which has been draped with bronze banister ropes, something which would normally be informal had they not been crafted from bronze. Just on the other side of the wall is the library, with half-height bookcases skirting the interior walls below Gould's most prized French paintings. He even mixed new furniture with centuries-old pieces, giving it an air of both modernity and legacy. While there aren't any photos of the bedrooms per se, we can get a pretty good idea of what they might have looked like by viewing some of the items from his estate auction, but that is getting a bit ahead in our story. Back in Depew, Gould's legacy was unfolding with tension. In 1914, the Gould Coupler Company faced one of New York's most cataclysmic labor strikes. When Gould's new general manager enforced stricter work hours and slashed breaks, nearly 900 union workers walked out. The strike escalated into riots and a fatal military intervention. Gould's hardline stance alienated many, and despite rebuilding afterward, the incident marked a turning point in public perception. Yet Gould remained influential until the end. In 1925, he commissioned the construction of 689 Fifth Avenue, known today as the Aeolian Building, just before his passing the following year. He left behind a massive estate worth over $12 million, a fortune worth the modern equivalent of nearly $250 million. In a rather touching detail from his will, Gould set aside enough funds to take care of his dogs and horses for life, a gesture that humanized a man remembered mostly for his employees' poor working conditions. Following his passing, Chateau Ivor was sold, its contents auctioned off, and the home itself fell into a cycle of ownership changes and name changes. Despite renovations, the estate never regained its former glory, and in 1954, the house was demolished. By the 21st century, nothing remained of Gould's French fantasy, just another neighborhood of cookie-cutter houses. Imagine inheriting $500 million. What would you do with it? Build massive houses? Buy expensive yachts? Adopt dozens of dogs and live on a farm? Well, all of those things are exactly what Edwin Morgan did when he inherited an unimaginable amount of money at just 29 years old. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit the subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1854, Alfred Waterman Morgan was born into a prominent New York family as the distant cousin of famed financier J.P. Morgan. After his father's untimely passing in 1879, Alfred's grandfather, the former New York governor Edward Dennison Morgan, urged that the young man assume the family name, which he did, renaming himself to Edward Dennison Morgan III. Morgan graduated from Harvard in 1877 and stepped into adulthood with every advantage of the Gilded Age elite. Upon his grandfather's passing in 1883, Morgan inherited approximately $12 million, worth the modern-day equivalent of about $385 million. He proved to be a savvy businessman, investing and expanding the wealth through a variety of enterprises. He founded the Nassau Light and Power Company to bring electric power to parts of Long Island, became a major shareholder in livestock and ranching ventures, and served as president of mining companies operating in Mexico in the early 20th century. These ventures, combined with astute financial management, kept Morgan among the ranks of America's richest men. Beyond business, he cultivated a lifestyle of leisure and sport that befitted a Gilded Age aristocrat. He was an avid yachtsman and a prominent member of the New York Yacht Club. In fact, he would later serve as its commodore in the 1920s and was part of the winning crew of the 1901 America's Cup yacht race. Society pages of the 1880s and 90s often featured Morgan as a dashing sportsman with a flair for adventure and luxury. With such means and interest, it was natural for him to establish magnificent homes for himself and his family. In 1888, he commissioned a showpiece summer residence in Newport, Rhode Island called Beacon Rock, designed by Stanford White of McKim Mead & White, a villa so grand that it earned the nickname the Acropolis of Newport. Around the same time, Morgan set his sights on Long Island's North Shore, purchasing large tracts of land where he planned to create his ultimate country estate. By 1890, he had begun work on what would become Wheatley, his most elaborate and personal project. Morgan chose a site in what was then called Wheatley Hills, now Old Westbury, eventually assembling over 650 acres atop the area's highest hill. Construction of the estate spanned roughly 10 years, from 1890 to 1900, under the guidance of the renowned architectural firm McKim Mead & White. The result was one of Long Island's largest and most complete Gilded Age estates. The centerpiece was a 200-foot-long main house designed in a colonial revival shingle-style blend. To create a broad level yard for his mansion on the hilltop, Morgan first had massive stone retaining walls built to form a plateau from the uneven terrain. The house sat at the crest of the hill, oriented to capture panoramic views of the estate and the distant waters of Long Island Sound. Just north of the residence, across an open courtyard, stood a tall water tower and an enormous stable complex. The stable alone measured about 250 feet long by 60 feet wide, with an adjacent coach house 200 by 40 feet, a scale that astonished local farmers accustomed to modest barns. The estate boasted its own electrical power supply, indoor plumbing and central heating, an indoor swimming pool, a private squash court, and even underground service tunnels, cutting-edge luxuries for the time. To maintain such a grand estate, more than 50 full-time staff were employed to run the household, stables, gardens, and farm, from coachmen and stable hands to gardeners, cooks, and maids. As we pull through the gate lodge's two-story porte-cochere and make our way towards the courtyard, I'd like to take a moment to say a special thank you to our members for making videos like this one possible. If you would like to contribute in part to our research and the creation of these videos, consider joining our membership program today. Now what do you say we find the front door and begin exploring the house? Inside Wheatley, the emphasis was on refined comfort rather than gaudy display. Quote, "While there is no conspicuous embellishment, provision for comfort has been wisely planned at royal expense," observed one reporter in 1894. The mansion's decor artfully mixed simplicity with personal flourishes reflecting Morgan's interest. For example, the floors in some rooms were planked and caulked like a ship's deck, and broad canvas sails hung above the cavernous fireplaces. Many rooms recalled early American colonial style: low, exposed ceiling beams, Simple rush-seated chairs and plain wooden log bins beside the hearth gave parts of the house a rustic, old-fashioned charm. This understated backdrop made the moments of true splendor stand out all the more. In the Great Hall, the ceiling soared with exposed beams set in sections of alternating angles, creating a truly dynamic space that broke from uniformity. This massive hall could double as the ballroom when he was entertaining. Morgan also outfitted a stately library, with fine mahogany bookshelves holding an exceptional collection of rare books and engravings begun by his grandfather, supplemented by treasures like framed letters from President Abraham Lincoln to the elder Governor Morgan, mementos the family proudly cherished. Now, the house didn't start out quite so grand. As Morgan's family grew, so did Wheatley. Over time, he expanded the mansion by adding wings around the central courtyard, effectively enclosing it on 3 sides. A covered arcade with white columns connected these additions to the main house, and an unusual feature, a labyrinth of underground tunnels, discreetly linked the mansion with the pool, chapel, and other outbuildings below ground. Morgan lived to see the twilight of the Gilded Age give way to the upheavals of the Great Depression. He passed away in 1933 at the age of 78, marking the end of an era for his family. Wheatley's fate after Morgan's time was emblematic of the broader decline of Long Island's Gilded Age mansions. Morgan's family did keep Wheatley intact for some years after this time, but cracks were beginning to show. In 1937, just a few years after Edwin's passing, his heirs sold off the entire property to a new owner, Randall J. LeBoeuf. After the sale, the grand old mansion did not remain intact for long. In the early 1950s, major portions of the house, including its expansive central section, were demolished to make way for a residential subdivision. In an unusual twist, the 2 large wings of the house were spared and converted into separate private residences, and even the estate's little chapel was preserved and remodeled as a standalone home. Today, the majority of the former 650-acre grounds has been redeveloped for other uses, most prominently as the campus of the Wheatley School. On Long Island, there is a mansion unlike any other. With over 25,000 square feet, stables, and formal gardens, it's fair to say that Career and Hastings outdid themselves. Hi everyone, Ken here. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. Herman B. Dorrier was a man who thrived on the thrill of the racetrack and the pursuit of excellence. Born in 1862, he built his name as a leading thoroughbred owner in the United States, but when anti-gambling laws shuttered racetracks in New York, he refused to accept defeat. Instead, he boldly relocated to France, where he established Haras de Gazon in Normandy and began an extraordinary second act. In France, Dorrier's horses achieved greatness. Sweeper claimed the English 2,000 guineas in 1912, but it was Durbar who delivered Dorrier's crowning moment at the 1914 Epsom Derby. Despite controversies over the colt's pedigree, Durbar surged ahead of 30 rivals to win by 3 lengths, stunning the crowd and proving that Dorrier's instincts were unmatched. His foresights extended beyond the track. Dorrier purchased the mare Frisette, whose bloodline produced racing legends like Seattle Slew and Mr. Prospector. But this wasn't where his legacy ended. He had been born into a wealthy family, which had allowed him to chase his dreams, and with means, he hired esteemed architects Career and Hastings to design for him an equestrian estate in New York's Old Westbury. Completed in 1903, the 25,000 square foot home was simply named Knoll for its unusual topography of small, rolling hills. The house itself was constructed of concrete, with marble dust mixed into it to give it a creamy, glittering appearance. In a way that only Career and Hastings could, the duo blended Italian Renaissance motifs with the Beaux-Arts to create a distinctly American manor. The grounds were planned to conform to the natural landscape, with long walks planned between the gentle hills. In their contours, sunken gardens were planned with long reflecting pools lined by colorful flowers. The estate was meant to balance the casual with the formal, including a reflecting pool which could double as a swimming pool. Secluded away on the 100-acre grounds, the stables were designed to be reminiscent of the legacy estates found in the area, a mansion of sorts for his prized horses. We could spend all day wondering about the gardens and horse paths, but I think it's about time we head inside. We'll take a quick look at the floor plan to note that we actually enter at the garden level, which is below the first floor. This leads us into the Kenstone-clad entrance hall, where we'll make our way up a few partial flights of stairs to reach the first floor. Once again, we can orient ourselves by referring to the floor plans and note that we are taking one of the mirrored staircases up to the rotunda just below the long gallery. After stepping up from one of the smaller archways, we are greeted by a multi-story rotunda filled with light and pierced by the grand staircase, which is centered on a marble fireplace at its landing. Once again, in the old traditions followed by the architects, mirrors are strategically placed in intervals to catch sunlight and send it all about the rotunda at each level, almost blindingly so. Next, we'll make our way over to the dining room, which is finished out with walnut paneling and a fireplace sans mantel. In the drawing room, in the opposite wing, the paneling is painted in a shade of pearl and the fireplace is inlaid with yellow marble. We can imagine this ensemble with crimson curtains, the height of fashion at the time. Both the dining room and the living room open out into mirrored loggias surrounding the courtyard. Back inside, we'll head over to the den, painted in a dark green with a green marble fireplace. Each bedroom evokes a different style, though perhaps the most luxurious suite was that of Mrs. Dorier, which includes a large sitting room, boudoir, dressing room, and a private bathroom. Knoll was enjoyed by the Dorier family for many years before it was sold to Bradley Martin and Helen Phipps, and it remained in their hands for the better part of a century. Over the years, the grounds were subdivided with plans for new homes to be built. However, the mansion itself has managed to survive. Imagine growing up poor and unexpectedly inheriting $1 billion. What would you do with it? Hi everyone, Ken here. Welcome to This House. Today we are exploring the home of William Coe in Oyster Bay, New York. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House. In the 1880s, when William Coe was just a teenager, his family emigrated to the New World from England. His father supported all 10 of his children by working as a cashier near Philadelphia while living in New Jersey. When William turned 15 years old, he set out to find a job in Philadelphia near his father and was hired by a successful insurance broker to do all the errands around the office. As the years went by and he began to learn about the inner workings of insurance, he was promoted to various positions. Then, when Johnson & Higgins Insurance Company bought out the company he was working for, William was promoted to the role of manager and sent off to New York City to manage the adjusting department. He fell in love for the first time and married Jane Fallingant, but she passed away only a few short years later. In 1900, following her death, William decided to take a trip back to England while he grieved. But just as fate would have it, he met his second wife, May Rogers. May was the daughter of oil baron Henry H. Rogers, who had amassed a fortune while working with Standard Oil. For the first time, he was exposed to a life he never knew existed. May frequented balls at palaces around the world, and when the two returned to New York City, he found himself rubbing shoulders with high society. Of course, no son-in-law of an oil baron could continue working in middle management. The family pulled some strings, and by 1910, William had been named the president of the Johnson & Higgins Insurance Company and was placed on the board of directors at the Virginian Railway. However, with the higher-level job title came more responsibility. Back at Johnson's & Higgins, he personally took on his most infamous account, insuring the unsinkable RMS Titanic. The Titanic embarked on its maiden journey, striking an iceberg and sinking. On board were several of his new friends and family through his wife. Of the 1,500 people who lost their lives that day, many were captains of industry, barons, and tycoons. This caused a massive transfer of wealth as their estates were divided amongst their heirs. May Rogers was one such trustee, receiving large sums of money through deceased family. The young couple now had serious cash to burn. In 1913, they headed out to Long Island, New York to purchase Upper Planting Fields Farm, an estate which boasted expansive botanical gardens. The original house mysteriously burned down, and the insurance claim, through Johnson & Higgins Insurance Company, paid for it to be replaced by a sprawling 67-room mansion. They hired the architecture firm of Walker & Gillette to design for them a Tudor Revival-style palace, to be faced in Indiana limestone, with artisan terracotta accents along its many prominent chimneys. The stonework featured intricate and ornate details, while the half-timbered sections boasted wooden busts extending from corbels. The mansion known as Coe Hall was to stand out proudly above the perfectly curated gardens, designed in part by the Olmsted brothers. More than 10,000 species of flowers, trees, and bushes were planted along trails and streams throughout the 400-plus-acre estate. Approaching the entry, we will pass below stone relief work and continue through the iron and wooden doors to arrive in the entry corridor. Upon entering the home, Our eyes are directed down the long, wide corridor flanked with thin stone pilasters supporting heavy stone arches. First, we will step into the reception room, off to the side, to be welcomed by a springtime assortment of cheerful greens and yellows decorating the wood-paneled walls. Directly above us, a crystal chandelier reflects light to illuminate the hand-stenciled floral motif of the cornice. Next, we will return to the entry hall and wind our way through the shadows to find the dining room furniture appearing silhouetted by the sunlight penetrating the hall. As we continue our approach, the room opens up as light pours in from two directions, allowing us to see the lively colors of the Persian rug and feel the warmth of old-growth wood beams coffering the ceiling. We will continue our tour to the gallery, where European tapestries and trophies decorate the walls below a vaulted ceiling joining on Gothic pointed arches. The Great Hall, with half-height bookshelves, is interrupted by the windows' limestone mullions below a playful ceiling displaying a banner of geometric designs complemented by exposed fluted beams. After winding through colonnades decorated with elaborate fretwork, we will find the reading room, offering a quiet retreat where William collected Americana in the form of letters and journals from early American settlers and pioneers. For more serious matters, including discussing business, the study could accommodate a small group for a private conversation. After making our way up the stairs, we can continue down the second-floor corridor to find the bedrooms. William's bedroom was finished out in layers of floral textiles, with heavy and overstuffed furniture covering the floors. May's bedroom was considerably less cluttered, with light, dainty furniture sparingly placed about so as to not distract from the elaborate wall murals and the delicately stenciled ceiling. Of the many guest rooms in the mansion, perhaps you would be assigned to this one, with half-timbered walls and a large bay window. The couple lived happily in the house until 1924, when May unexpectedly passed away. Over the next couple of years, William became enamored with breeding and racing horses, adding state-of-the-art stables to the property. By 1937, he had competed with 6 different horses in the Kentucky Derby, earning second place in the races. In his later years, he began to reflect on his success in life and to give back through charitable donations. He established American Studies programs at 40 universities, both public and private. He then headed out west to Wyoming, where he purchased a ranch and made significant donations. He opened hospitals, donated artwork, paved streets, and built Coe Hall at the University of Wyoming. Finally, in 1949, he deeded Coe Hall to the state of New York with a hefty endowment. His former estate was to be open to the public as the Planting Fields Arboretum, and the historic gardens were to continue being cared for. A few years later, in 1955, he passed away while vacationing at his beach house in Palm Beach, Florida. To this day, most of the colleges he donated to have continued building on their American Studies programs. As for Planting Fields Arboretum, it remains open to the public, preserved as a time capsule both inside and out, where visitors can fully immerse themselves in a beautiful, bygone era. At the dawn of the 20th century, the American landscape was marked by rapid industrial growth and the emergence of figures who were determined to leave their marks on the nation's history. Among these was Henry P. Davison, a financier whose life story emulates the American dream, a remarkable story from modest beginnings to the pinnacles of financial and social prominence. Hi everyone, Ken here. Welcome to this house. Born in Troy, Pennsylvania, Henry aspired to climb the social ladder, working hard and studying in his free time. He dreamed of one day attending Harvard, but knew it was a long shot for a man of modest means. When he was denied a scholarship, he decided to carve his own way into society. Moving to Bridgeport, Connecticut, he encountered P.T. Barnum, the famed circus producer. This meeting proved fortuitous, as Barnum introduced Henry to influential local figures, including the Truby family, into which Henry would marry, solidifying his social standing. Henry's career in finance began in New York City, where he quickly ascended the ranks, eventually becoming president of the Liberty National Bank and founding the Bankers Trust Company. His financial insight caught the attention of George Banker of the First National Bank and later the legendary financier J.P. Morgan, who enlisted Henry's help during the Panic of 1907. In 1909, He joined JP Morgan as a senior partner, and during this time, JP Morgan listened to Henry's advocacy for a central banking system before meeting with other banking magnates on Jekyll Island in 1910 to begin establishing the Federal Reserve. Henry had finally made it to the top of the social ladder. Along this journey, he accumulated great wealth, and with his newfound fortune, he set out to build his dream house. The Charles Gates mansion in Glen Cove, New York had just burned down, and the family was selling the prime lot overlooking Long Island Sound. In 1914, Henry purchased it and hired renowned architects Walker and Gillette to design a neo-Georgian mansion with a commanding presence. He then hired the Olmsted brothers to create a park-like setting to surround his mansion. After 2 long years of construction, Henry's estate known as Peacock Point was completed. The red brick house was dressed in classical elements with ornate balustrade and pediments decorating each level. Expansive porches allowed his family to enjoy fresh air along the water, and critics wrote about the mansion. It is ardent, earnest, and spirited. As we continue around Peacock Point, we will search for the main entrance. We find the front door flanked by limestone columns with intricate, delicate relief work forming vines to surround the arched opening. Swinging open the front doors, we arrive in the entrance hall, finished out with a dotted marble floor and wood-paneled walls and set with murals at the stair landing. Venturing into the dining room, we find the Georgian style has been refined to suit American taste, blending traditional design with refined, but more modern finishes for the time. The rounded breakfast room continues this playful twist on the style with a large, multicolored glass dome soaring overhead. Continuing into the sitting room, despite its large size, we find that it is arranged to be a comfortable retreat, and though it boasts expensive artwork and furniture, it is meant to feel homey and not ostentatious. The library continues this trend of livable spaces, with comfortable sofas, large windows, and plenty of lamps to read by. Henry enjoyed Peacock Point for the rest of his life, giving back to the world by raising $4 million for the Red Cross during World War I. Unfortunately, the rest of his life was only for 6 years, and he passed away while having a brain tumor removed at the age of 55 in 1922. His wife Kate continued living at Peacock Point until her passing in 1961, and unlike many of the families whose wealth was born from the Gilded Age and squandered by the children, the family continues to own the property 5 generations later, despite the house having been demolished after Kate's passing. Imagine being one of the wealthiest people in the world and being told that you are not allowed to pursue your hobbies. Hi everyone, Ken here. This is the story of the Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney Art Studio. Hit the subscribe button and let's explore this house. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney was born into one of the most illustrious families in American history, the Vanderbilts, known for their vast fortune made through railroads and shipping. Born in 1875, Gertrude was the daughter of Cornelius Vanderbilt II, and her great-grandfather was none other than the Commodore, the man who built a financial empire that made the Vanderbilt name synonymous with wealth. Growing up in New York City, Gertrude lived in opulence at the family's Fifth Avenue mansion, a palatial residence that was a symbol of Gilded Age grandeur. She spent her summers at the Breakers, the family's summer cottage in Newport, Rhode Island, where she developed a love for art and sport, competing with her brothers in various activities. However, despite her privileged upbringing, Gertrude was not content to merely live the life of a socialite. Her artistic inclinations became evident early on as she filled her journals with sketches and watercolors. But her true passion for art blossomed when she visited Europe in the early 1900s, immersing herself in the avant-garde art scene of Paris. She decided to pursue a career in sculpture, which was an unconventional choice for a woman of her social standing. Her family was not particularly supportive of this decision. Neither her parents nor her husband, Harry Payne Whitney, a wealthy sportsman and heir to the Whitney fortune, took her artistic ambitions seriously. Yet, Gertrude persisted. She studied at the Art Students League of New York and in Paris, where she worked under the guidance of renowned sculptors, including Auguste Rodin. Despite the challenges posed by her social class, she refused to let her wealth and status define her art. Gertrude's marriage to Harry Payne Whitney in 1896 united 2 powerful families, the Vanderbilts and the Whitneys. Harry, like Gertrude, came from a wealthy family with deep roots in American business and wealth. His father, William Collins Whitney, was a politician and financier, while his mother, Flora Payne Whitney, was the daughter of a Standard Oil magnate. The couple was a part of the elite social circles of New York and maintained residences in Manhattan and Long Island. Together they had 3 children, Flora Payne Whitney, Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, and Barbara Whitney. Though her marriage to Harry gave her stability, it did little to fulfill her personal ambitions. Harry did not take her work seriously, but his apathy only fueled her determination. Her art career took off with her first public commission, Aspiration, a life-size male statue displayed at the Pan American Exposition in 1901. Initially, Gertrude submitted her work under a pseudonym to avoid being dismissed as a mere socialite, but by 1910 she had gained enough confidence to exhibit under her own name. Over the years, her works gained recognition for their scale and emotional depth. One of her most celebrated pieces is the Titanic Memorial in Washington, D.C., a somber tribute to the lives lost in the tragedy. Her Buffalo Bill, the Scout in Cody, Wyoming, further solidified her reputation as a monumental sculptor. Around this time, she began searching for a private retreat where she could get away from society and focus solely on her love for creation. In Old Westbury, she commissioned the renowned firm of Delano and Aldrich to design for her an artistic haven, a pavilion surrounded by nature where she could create day in and day out. Completed in 1913, Delano was quoted as saying, "Mrs. Harry Payne Whitney asked me to build a studio in the woods at Westbury where she could get away from Harry's polo-playing friends. She put me in full charge, with no mention of cost." In a signature move by the architects, the studio was planned with formal gardens extending from the front and rear, but nestled within a heavily wooded area to give Gertrude the isolation and natural setting she desired. To enter the studio, we step into the vestibule above an intricate pebble mosaic and below an ornate groin vault. This leads us into the antehall, color-drenched in pink with white accents and opening into the main hall. Turning around, we find the main room of the studio measuring 40 by 60 feet with 20-foot ceilings framing a skylight. Here she could entertain friends and host parties by arranging the furniture into conversational circles. She could also bring out the dining room table and stage it for dinners, though that wasn't the primary purpose of this room. When not entertaining, sculptures were suspended from the ceilings with scaffolding set up all around so that she could spend her days in artistic pursuit. The entire studio was designed to be modular, with screens acting as movable walls that could define spaces as needed. These screens were the brainchild of artist Robert W. Chandler, who was known for tinting his ivory paint to create golden hues. While there are very few rooms in the studio, the stair hall is one of them, wrapped in colorful murals with checkered marble floors and rounded millwork, including doors that round out ever so slightly to conform to the room. The studio has been updated over the years to include bedrooms and a more modern kitchen, but for the most part, much of it remains intact with artworks by Gertrude herself. But sculpture wasn't her only contribution to the art world. She was a generous patron of American art and artists, particularly during a time when European art dominated the cultural landscape. In 1914, she opened the Whitney Studio in Greenwich Village, providing struggling artists with a space to exhibit their work. This act of philanthropy evolved into the Whitney Studio Club, a forerunner to the Whitney Museum of American Art, which she would later establish in 1931. Gertrude's collection of nearly 700 pieces of modern American art formed the foundation of the museum after her offer to donate it to the Metropolitan Museum of Art was rejected. The Whitney Museum, now a landmark institution, is one of her greatest legacies. But her philanthropy did not stop at art. World War I deeply impacted Gertrude, leading her to devote time and resources to wartime relief efforts. She even set up a hospital for wounded soldiers in France and created a series of sculptures depicting the horrors of war. These experiences transformed her work, making it more serious and emotionally resonant. Though her professional life was fulfilling, Gertrude faced significant personal challenges. She suffered from postpartum depression after the birth of her third child and discovered that her husband was unfaithful. Her unconventional life also put her at odds with societal expectations, and she formed deep emotional attachments to women, particularly a close friend, Esther Hunt, with whom she shared intimate letters. This aspect of her personal life was kept private, but it is a testament to her complex emotional world. In 1930, tragedy struck when her husband Harry died of pneumonia. This loss, however, did not stop Gertrude from continuing her work. In 1934, she became embroiled in a highly publicized custody battle for her niece, Gloria Vanderbilt. The court case, which painted Gertrude as a stabilizing force in her niece's life, further established her reputation as a strong and compassionate woman. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney's contributions to American art are monumental. Not only did she break barriers as a female sculptor in a male-dominated field, but she also championed the cause of American modernism, ensuring that future generations of American artists had a platform to showcase their work. By the time of her death in 1942, she had left behind a legacy that transcended her Vanderbilt and Whitney heritage. Through her art and the museum that bears her name, Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney's influence endures, ensuring her place in the pantheon of American cultural icons. The Phipps family is well known for their palatial mansions in Old Westbury and in Palm Beach, but few have ever heard about Hal Phipps homes. With rooms clad in gold and centuries-old architectural salvage, it's easy to ask ourselves what happened. Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are uncovering the forgotten Phipps mansions. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. At the turn of the 20th century, a young man named Henry Carnegie Phipps, better known as Hal, stepped into a world most of us only dream about. Born in 1879 in Pittsburgh, Hal was part of a newly minted American aristocracy. His father, Henry Phipps Jr., was the lifelong friend and business partner of Andrew Carnegie. Together they built Carnegie Steel, one of the most powerful industrial empires of the Gilded Age. When the company was sold to J.P. Morgan, Hal's father walked away not just with millions, but with a new sense of philanthropic purpose and a mountain of wealth to pass along. Hal grew up surrounded by the expectations of his fortune. He graduated from Yale in 1902, mingled with the right families, and when the time came, married into one of the most prominent of them all. In 1907, Hal wed Gladys Livingston Mills, the daughter of financier Ogden Mills and granddaughter of Darius Ogden Mills, a titan of California's gold rush era. Their wedding, held at her family's palatial Staatsburg estate, was covered in the social columns, and their registry reportedly tallied over $1 million in gifts. Around that same time, Hal made a fateful real estate decision. He purchased an estate from a man named William L. Stowe, a wealthy financier who had commissioned a spectacular home in the Roslyn area of Long Island, today known as Old Westbury. Designed by a young John Russell Pope, who would later become one of America's most celebrated architects, this house was something extraordinary. Built between 1900 and 1903, the home was originally known as Stowe's Mansion, but Hal and Gladys renamed it Spring Hill. Built from brick and covered over in a creamy stucco, this Beaux-Arts palace was topped off by a red tile roof. The house had been positioned on the property's highest point, propped up by a marble-clad retaining wall to separate it from the gardens below. As we make our way down the wide stairs, we can glance out beyond the balustrade to see this all come together sculpturally. Down below we find the water garden, with pea gravel paths for meandering about. As we look back towards the house, we'll note that the entire stretch of windows between the columns is the ballroom, which we'll see soon enough. As we continue down the terrace, we'll pass between life-size lion statues looking towards the sea in the distance. We could get lost in the paths that wind off into the dense forest, so I think it's about time we made our way back around front to the forecourt. Here we find the main entrance, tucked away between massive columns. Let's head inside. First, we'll dive towards the rear of the house to find the 15th century hall, which doubles as the ballroom and extends from wing to wing as the largest room in the house. The room is paneled in half-height black walnut with a Venetian red velvet brocade continuing to the coffered ceiling, and architectural salvage has been incorporated throughout, including the serpentine columns of the fireplace, which originated in a much older Italian church. To one side of the hall, we find the dining room, its floor composed of a Renaissance marble mosaic. The walls and ceiling are finished out in a vibrant green, with gilded details all about. To the other side of the hall is the aptly named Gold Salon, which contains heavily gilded woodwork framing in a pale green brocade which continues from floor to ceiling. Continuing through the mansion, we come across the library, finished out in black walnut with relief work and motifs meant to evoke Venetian Renaissance. The couple expanded the estate over time, continuing renovations that made the house feel even more palatial, with more gold, more marble, and more artisan touches throughout. But Spring Hill wasn't the only architectural jewel of Hal Phipps. In Palm Beach, Florida, where the social season glittered beneath the sun, Hal and Gladys built another masterpiece, Hee-Maw. The name, a nod to the seminal phrase, "come here," reflected the home's inviting presence, though it was anything but simple. Conceived by architect Francis Hoffman Jr., who had also designed Villa Vizcaya in Miami, the home was inspired by Italian villas with interior courtyards and terraces that opened to ocean views. Hee-Maw featured additions by the famed Palm Beach architect Addison Meisner, and it had everything from saltwater pools to a gardenia garden designed for the family's white peacocks, and even a Galapagos-sized tortoise named Whitley. In time, it became one of the grandest homes on Phipps Row, a stretch of North Ocean Boulevard where many of the family's Palm Beach estates clustered together. No matter the season, the Phippses knew how to live. At Spring Hill, the summers were filled with elegant lawn parties and garden walks, and in winter, they entertained at Hee-Maw, playing polo games along the surf. When they weren't at either estate, they could be found yachting, golfing, or at Camp Chaleur, their rustic but no less exclusive fishing retreat. Hal passed away in 1953, and Gladys continued to summer at Spring Hill until her passing in 1970. But what happened next is a sobering reminder of how even the grandest homes are not immune to time. Hal and Gladys' son, Ogden Phipps, inherited Spring Hill. With his own estate nearby and facing steep taxes, over $70,000 a year just to maintain the now empty house, he made the difficult decision to raze it. In its place, the croquet lawn was converted into a helicopter pad, and the house that had once been hailed as a Renaissance palace was gone. Hee-Maw didn't fare much better. After Gladys' passing, it was sold for just $625,000 to a new owner who left it unguarded. Vandals ripped it apart. Priceless architectural details, Meisner coral stone, carved wood moldings, marble staircases were all looted or destroyed. Some ended up in Belglade, where an insurance company grafted salvaged fragments onto its office building. But by 1972, what was left of Hema was bulldozed. What Howling Gladys created at Spring Hill and Hema was more than opulence. They built a lifestyle, a legacy, and for a time, they helped define what it meant to live large in America's Gilded Age and beyond. How did Russia end up owning one of Long Island's largest estates? And better yet, what happened to it? Hi everyone, Ken here. Today we are discovering Killingworth, the former home of George Dupont Pratt. Hit that subscribe button and let's explore this house. In 1869, George Dupont Pratt was born into one of the wealthiest families in the US. His father Charles made a fortune in petroleum, first through his own ventures and then through a consolidation with Standard Oil. This provided the family with more money than they could ever spend, but that didn't stop them from trying. The Pratts began building some of the largest homes on Long Island, and when it was George's turn to build his own house, he had grand plans. He purchased an older house known as Killingworth, a proper cottage that was elegant in its own right, but it wasn't this house that he wanted, it was the land it sat on. George promptly had it demolished, giving himself a blank slate to imagine his dream home. Completed in 1913 and designed by architects Trowbridge and Ackerman, Killingworth was conceived not merely as a residence, but a living work of art. The mansion's facade of seam-faced granite, complemented by Indiana limestone and topped with Vermont slate, presented a striking blend of solidity and grace. As we begin rotating about the 39-room mansion, we find a series of terraces marked by stone balustrade. Some of these terraces lend themselves to grand staircases, which in turn lead to paths. Following these paths will take you all about the property, where you will discover park-like meadows, perfectly manicured lawns framed by parterre gardens, and still ponds, all adding to the air of serenity. George was known to be athletic, so some spaces were left open so that he could enjoy playing football or other sports, though the activities he enjoyed were definitely done in style. To free up time for his leisure, a small army of 50 groundskeepers shuffled about, ensuring that every blade of grass was always the perfect length. When plants would wither, George would never know, as replacement flowers would be waiting for planting in the greenhouses. As we stumble through the wooded areas, we emerge on a large pool. This is in fact the swimming pool. We can turn around at this point to see the house coming back into focus with yet another terrace to explore. Up here we find the tea house, offering some of the best views on the estate. Its arcades frame this viewshed of Long Island Sound, where sailboats would gracefully glide by all day long. We can zoom out from here to see how the main bulk of the estate comes together, getting a general sense of where the house is in relation to the gardens and everything we've seen so far, though we still haven't seen every face of the house. As we make our way towards the front door, we'll travel through the garden. Then we'll pass by the garage and cut up a path towards the front. For as grand as the mansion might be from this angle, the landscaping really hides just how truly massive this house is. The double doors are where we're headed, somewhat understated below a large bay of stained glass windows accented by Gothic tracery. To better orient ourselves as we explore the mansion, let's take a quick look at the floor plan, noting that we are entering at the landing, then taking the stairs to the entrance hall. I unfortunately don't have a clear picture of the landing other than this one, but this section right here might better illustrate how the landing and entrance hall are connected. Now that we've traveled to the entrance hall, we are basically in the center of the house with archways on each wall that will lead us to different rooms. Let's continue straight for now. This leads us to the gallery, clad in rich wood paneling boasting intricate relief work. The gallery connects to the living room, once again paneled in dark rich woodwork that now continues to clad the coffered ceiling. Here he displays some of his most prized artwork, including a European tapestry. Before we move on from this room, let's take a closer look at the fireplace's mantel, where we find fleur-de-lis among the decorative relief. The living room terminates in the solarium, where we find everything from bronze peacocks above the doors to tropical plants being grown here year-round. If we cut back through the living room, we'll find the all-white music room, daring to contrast all the heavy woodwork we've seen throughout so far. The music room connects to the hall, where we catch only the slightest glimpse of the study. This puts us back in the entrance hall, facing a different archway which will lead us to another wing of the mansion. Stepping through the archway takes us to the hall. On one side is the door to the pantry with a staircase leading to the kitchen, and in front of us are the double doors leading to the dining room. The dining room is the largest room in the house, once again clad in rich wood paneling, but this time introducing a Jacobean ceiling. Here we find a large bay of stained glass facing the front of the house, as well as another antique European tapestry hung proudly on the wall. As we lean closer in to see the details, I want to point out the window seats to either side of the fireplace, a rather cozy feature for such a formal space. Up on the second floor, given the sheer number of bedrooms, we'll just take a quick look at George's, then move along. Following Killingworth's completion, it was named Country Life in America's Best House of the Year. Everything from the facade to the layout to the gardens were praised for their excellence in design. But when the house finally changed hands, accolades turned into skepticism. After George Pratt's passing in 1935, Kenilworth began a new and unexpected chapter. By the late 1940s, the property was acquired by the Soviet Union as a retreat for its United Nations delegation. Its serene grounds turned into a diplomatic enclave, sparking decades of local controversy and stories that swirled with allegations of espionage. As the decades passed, the estate became even more embroiled in conspiracies as it welcomed controversial guests, including Fidel Castro. The Russians claimed tax exemption, which led to a long legal dispute and several court battles, and to this day, Killingworth remains under the ownership of the Russian delegation. As for the grounds and the interior, it's anyone's best guess if they remain intact or have been altered. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about Killingworth? Did you have a favorite room or feature? Let me know down below in the comments section, and while you're there, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.